Brainerd Planning Commission meeting for March 19th, 2025. First thing we'll do is do a roll call. Stephanie.
All right, Peterson,
Here.
Norwood, Grasula,
Here.
Gorham,
Here.
Higgins,
Here.
Powell, Erickson.
Here.
All right. Looking for somebody to lead the pledge. Peterson?
Yes.
The honors? You're pretty good at it.
I'm not sure. Been doing it since kindergarten.
Well, there you are. All right, we're up to number 4. We're looking for approval for tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second. All right,
Just a heads up, for topic 6C, I will need to recuse myself.
very good, very good. Excellent. Without any, I don't think we need any discussion. All in favor say aye on the agenda.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. We're looking for approval for the February minutes. Looking for a motion, please.
One comment, if I could.
Yes.
So one change, I was made aware that there was one small clarification with Councilman Yeager's comments at the public hearing. And mostly it was kind of presented as it was mostly in favor of, and I think he just had some concern, expressed some concerns. I wanted to make that change, that he expressed some concerns as well.
Stephanie, are you going to be able to accommodate that? Yep. Very good. We have a plan? All right, excellent.
With that change, then so moved.
So moved. All right, did we get a second here? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we're moving on to 6A. This is an interim use permit for a year-round shelter at 1926 South 7th. James, would you like to set us up a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the current interim use permit for the shelter expires on June 30th of 2025. The facility currently operates between the months of September 1st through April 30th of each year. The applicant is proposing to operate the shelter year-round. Warming shelter for the purposes of temporarily sheltering homeless persons must meet the following criteria according to the allowed use section. Operation may not exceed 16 continuous hours. Facility occupancy shall not exceed 30 beds, or total occupancy of the facility as set by the fire marshal, whichever is less. Facility shall be staffed during all hours of operation. 24-hour contact information shall be provided to the City of Brainerd Police Department and Crow Wing County Community Services Department. Except for bicycle racks, the outdoor storage of equipment, furniture, personal items, or other such possessions of those using the facility is not permitted. The facility shall meet all applicable building, safety, fire, and health code requirements. The applicant meets all the criteria and have not been in violation since beginning operation. In addition to the proposed use, the proposed use shall preserve the objectives of the ordinance and shall be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Public Safety Goal 1, Brainerd will protect and provide for the safety of residents and visitors. Policy 1, make efficient use of existing facilities to ensure access to emergency services for all residents and visitors. In staff's opinion, the warming shelter has provided an asset to the community as it shelters those in need during extremely cold winter conditions. Shelter staff have worked well with emergency services, also with the Community Development Department. Public Safety Goal 1, Policy 3, continuously seek to eradicate crime through innovative and contemporary strategies, including preventative, proactive, and responsive measures. The Police Department did include data along with the submittal request here. After reviewing the data provided by the Police Department, staff does see a correlation of an increase in incidents occurring at the in the shelter or within one block of the shelter. And staff does have concerns that expanding operation of the shelter will again increase incidents in that neighborhood. I did want to note that not all incidents are crime related, but some are. The list also indicates new non-Brainerd residents. Just as of note, during this time, the Community Development Department has not received calls regarding the operation, has not received any concerns after the notice was sent out. So with that, staff recommend approval of the interim use permit contingent upon the following conditions. The facility operates between the months of September 1st, April 30th of each year. Interim use permit shall expire June 30th of 2028. If the Brainerd Police Department determines that the facility has been used in a disorderly manner and upon recommendation of the police chief, the interim use permit shall be brought before City Council for review and consideration for suspending or revoking the permit at the next available City Council meeting. Also that shelter staff shall provide a report to City Council each year prior to September 1st. So to clarify, staff's recommendation is approval, but the conditions would not allow for year-round operation. With that, the applicants are here to answer questions, and I can also answer any questions.
Before we start a hearing, any questions for James? Hearing none, I'm going to open a public hearing at 6:05, and I would love to have the applicant come up.
Good evening, Commission members.
Your name and address?
My name is Jana Sjogren, and I am representing 2011 South 6th Street, which is where Bridges of Hope is residing. Quick summary, since we opened in December of 2021, we have helped 508 different individuals with over 12,000 nights of safe, warm sleep. When I look at our broader impact, we support individuals through their most difficult days. We help people transition to treatment for addiction or mental health illnesses when needed. And we assist those dealing with medical challenges such as cancer and diabetes, those who are unhoused or dealing with some of the same very challenging situations that many of us deal with. We're here tonight to apply for our next interim use permit to continue services at the bridge for another 3 years. With the recent passages of ordinances related to camping on city land, our organization also asks you to grant us the opportunity to pilot a year-round operation for this summer. We appreciate Mr. Kramvik's recommendation to continue operations as they have been and want to respond to the information provided to you regarding the police incidents. The data cites 119 interactions with the Brainerd Police Department over the last approximately 3 1/4 years. After adjusting those calls for calls that I would say would have happened anyway, whether we had a shelter or not, there were EMS calls, suicide attempts, general disturbances that could have happened anywhere, they just happened to happen at the shelter, and referrals into the shelter after 11 p.m., as that is our practice to have safety for everyone. If somebody needs to come in after 11 p.m., we want them to have to contact the police department or the emergency room. That was per our policies when we opened. If you adjust for those things that likely would have happened anyway, it brings us to 48 calls. That's 1.6 calls per month on average since we've been opened. I don't think that's an extreme number. Police interactions do not equate to crime in all situations, as Mr. Kramvik said. If the bridge does not remain open for the summer, interactions between law enforcement and the unhoused population will likely increase. Without the bridge, those who are unhoused will have no centralized option and will instead be forced to camp or congregate elsewhere. I would encourage those involved to look into the data on police interactions over the past 2 summers related to the encampments that we know exist. There was clearly an impetus for the cities in the area to put these bans on public camping, so there must be some sort of an issue. In addition, the ordinance states law enforcement will refer to services and provide resource options. That will be incredibly difficult for officers if our shelter isn't open in the summer. What services and resources will there be to refer to someone to sleep at night? We've also heard the concern that the bridge brings people from outside the area, and I will share this. Our shelter is intended for use of locals. The next nearest shelters are in Bemidji and St. Cloud. Before the bridge, our own community's response was to offer people a bus ticket to St. Cloud when they needed it. While some guests come from outside the area, that is true, only 8% of the nights of sleep that we have provided have been for individuals from outside Crow Wing, Aiken, Cass, Mille Lacs, Morrison, Todd, or Wadena counties, which I would argue are surrounding communities to us. In many cases, if the individuals were not from that area, they were being released from the Crow Wing County Jail. Again, not our doing. And often needed some place to sleep for the night until they could arrange transportation home the next day, which I would then argue we're actually providing a very good service to the community because these folks have somewhere to be at night rather than wandering around town. In his findings of fact, Mr. Kramvik states, the proposal is not consistent with public safety goal number 1, which says Brainerd will protect and provide for the safety of residents and visitors, and I respectfully disagree. The majority of police interactions in the report were not crime-related. It is safer to those we serve and for the general public, for those who are unhoused to have a centralized option for where to stay at night rather than coming up for their own solution in our communities. Mr. Kramvik also states in his recommendation, the Community Development Department has not received a complaint from the public regarding the shelter after the issuance of their IUP in 2022. Not received a complaint from the community. As of this writing, he also says, no one has contacted the Community Development Department with concerns or objections to the interim use permit. I would encourage you to consider more than one police report when making your recommendation to the City Council, please. To wrap up, I appreciate my recent thoughtful conversations with Mr. Kramvik and Chief Davis. However, these are the first concerns that I have heard from either of them in 3 years of operating the shelter. I believe Mr. Kramvik got his recommendation right with one exception. I invite the Planning Commission to add a provision for a pilot program allowing year-round operations just from May 1st to August 31st of 2025. This pilot would include twice-monthly meetings between the Bridges of Hope, the Bridge on 7th, the Brainerd Police Department, and Crow Wing County Community Services to monitor and adjust as needed. If summer operations are determined to negatively impact public safety, the police chief may recommend suspending programming until September 1st, 2025. When operations successfully last the summer, we will then be able to plan for and seek approval together for future year-round operations. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Any questions for Ms. Sjogren before she steps down? Any questions for her? I have just a couple.
Sure.
In general, can you tell me what happens with the homeless population in the summer in our area? Does it go up or go down? Does it stay the same?
Well, we haven't operated in the summer, so I can't speak to that. I don't have numbers to that, but I know there are some folks here tonight that would like to comment on that. I know our local county has a significant amount of interaction with folks in the summertime.
Very, very good. And my follow-up question, I know Crow Wing County is being involved in providing some funding. Can you kind of describe that to me?
Sure. So the funding actually comes from the state of Minnesota. It flows to the county, and then we have a contract with the county for that funding. I'm not the expert from the county, so you can certainly allow someone else to speak to it more fully, but it was a conversion of dollars that were already coming into the county that weren't able to be fully leveraged, and it's specifically for the housing of people in emergency situations. So it's been wonderful for the financial sustainability of our shelter.
Very good. So it's clearly a community-wide effort here.
Correct.
To provide. Very good.
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. We may ask you.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, we have one more question.
I do
There
have
we
one
go.
that came up. So your pilot program, basically, it's just extending what you're doing right now. No difference, just
Correct.
extending the time frame.
Correct. We just want people to have a safe place to sleep in a centralized spot so they're not all over the community.
Right, thank you.
Very good. Any other questions for Ms. Sjogren? If not, we may have questions for you later, but thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
All right, I'm going to open the floor now. Just a couple ground rules here. I'll have you state your name and your address when you come up to speak. I'll ask that you try to keep remarks, about 3 minutes or so. I'm not going to put a stopwatch on you, but if we can keep things fairly quick, we can allow more people a chance to speak. And if somebody's already kind of covered ground on a subject, maybe try to put a little spin on it so we're not hearing the same message over and over again. It's helpful if we hear a lot of different perspectives. That's definitely will help us. With that, I'm going to open the floor and invite anybody to come up and speak.
Hi, hello. I'm Rachel Zita, and I'm here representing the county. I am Adult Services Supervisor for our Behavioral Health, Chemical Health, Housing, and Homeless team. I just want to kind of ditto everything that Jana said. We're in full support of this and kind of coming at it through the county perspective and from some of the work that I've been doing in the community for quite a long period of time. Don't want to admit to that, but I have been. So one thing I like to always do is I love to share a little bit of numbers. So kind of giving you a scope of kind of what's happening around, within our community, the state, and nationwide around housing and homelessness and our at-risk folks. So each year we collect data on how many individuals may be experiencing homelessness or at risk on a single night. So this study has been done for quite a long period of time. So pre-COVID, the numbers I'm going to start with is in 2019. Our national number was 567,715 people in the United States were experiencing homelessness. In 2019 in Minnesota, we had 7,977, and then in Crow Wing County, we had 76. Now, I'm going to fast forward a little bit post-COVID because during that time, we weren't allowed to do kind of the normal data points that we did. But in 2023, that number, our national number, jumped up to 653,000. And in Minnesota, it jumped up to 9,000, and in Crow Wing County, we've seen an increase of 135 people. Now, just in our last count of 2024, the national average was 771,000. In Minnesota, 9,000, and like I said, 135. So just in the one short year, here in Crow Wing County, we increased to 21. In Minnesota, there was a total of 808 people, and our national average went up to 189,000. So when you look at that, our numbers are definitely increasing, and it's not reducing based on the current trend. And you had mentioned, what happens during the summertime. A lot of the individuals who are not utilizing the shelter obviously are trying to find some place to find refuge. And a lot of individuals do come to the county. Unfortunately, we don't have any housing available to them, or we don't have any emergent needs for them to provide any type of sheltering for everybody. So our numbers, we do see a little bit of an increase, in the calls and people asking for help during that time, and our resources are very, very limited. I just kind of want to share a positive impact about some of the things that have happened, bringing the shelter into our community. We have been able to house more individuals because we're able to locate them. We all understand that when someone is moving around a lot, it's very hard to connect with them and to maintain, and it takes a long time to find services. I'm just going to share a quick story about an individual who is currently utilizing our community resources and the overnight shelter, and then using our community partners. So this individual was a thriving person in the community. He had housing, he had a job, and he had an unforeseen incident where he was diagnosed with dementia. We all kind of know the effects of that illness. With the decline of his memory, he has lost his housing, lost his employment, and had nothing. Luckily, he was able to use the shelter, use the day center, use services in the community, and so forth. Now, we all know with dementia, routine is very, very, very important because it brings that consistency. It reduces a lot of negative effects and behaviors and so forth. This summer, we're very, very concerned about what may happen to this individual if the shelter is not open. It's going to disrupt that routine, and there will be more negative effects, and that will impact that individual. We honestly don't know kind of what's going to happen if the shelter is not given a year-round opportunity. This is just one story of many, many, many different people's options. I have yet to find one individual that has the same story. It's such a complex need, but one thing that I can say is having the shelter does bring some type of consistency, routine, and safety into our community. Any questions?
Any questions? Hearing none, thank you very
Okay,
much. I appreciate your
thanks.
time. Next up.
Good evening. Bill Weir, 1926 South 7th, representing the Bridge on 7th shelter. So I have been working at the shelter since we opened our doors in December of 2021. When we opened our doors, we had no idea what we were expecting. Our first year, our max was maybe 12 a night. Now that we're well into operation, we're experiencing well into the mid-20s and at capacity at some of our colder nights. One thing to note about homelessness is nobody is immune to it. It can happen to anybody. All it takes is a couple of wrong decisions or a couple of bad experiences. It could really happen to anybody. And if you're homeless, you do not get a day off from being homeless. Just because the weather is nice does not mean you're not going to be homeless. You still have to find a place to sleep at nights. Since working at the shelter, I have noticed a wide variety of ages coming in to our shelter. Most of our guests are generally around the 36 to 45 age, with 25%. 19 to 25 years old is 32%, and 56 to 81 is 23%. 23% of our guests are in the elderly and older ages. And that comes with a lot of challenges too. There are a lot of challenges in this area, lack of affordable housing. The affordable housing is very slim to none in this area, and as much as our guests are trying to find housing, you can't when there's nothing available. There's a lack of accessible services such as treatment beds, mental health facilities, and reliable and consistent transportation. Our city transportation only operates Monday through Friday from 6 to 5 p.m. When you don't have a vehicle and those are the only times you have to get around, that makes it very, very difficult because people still do have to work on the weekends. And a lot of times people do get off at 7, 9, 10 o'clock at evening. And you have to call a cab, and cabs can be rather expensive as well. There's also complicated and unclear paperwork involved with accessing services. I have been on the end of that too, where I've been trying to fill out paperwork and I didn't understand what was going on. I asked questions and I got 3 different answers from 3 different people. It's very confusing, and for somebody suffering from mental health disabilities and substance abuse, it's very, very unclear. There's also the lack of address. It's harder to find a job and fill out an application when you don't have a clear representative address. And there's also harder to stay up to date on your progress of resources as well as case management if you aren't getting your mail. And one of the biggest one is the distrust of officials and authority figures. We are working very, very hard to negate that issue. We are trying to build that trust, but the fact of the matter is a lot of our guests have the distrust of authority figures. The trust is a huge one. If they're not going to trust us, they're not going to use our resources. I have been working very, very hard over the last 3 years to build up a relationship and trust with our guests. I just ask that you guys really consider being open all year round so we can have an option for our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. Much appreciated.
Yep. Any questions?
I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Kathy Dufour. I am here as a volunteer. I belong to I live in Brainerd, Minnesota. Do you need my address? Is that
It'd
okay?
be nice if you could, yes.
17077 Pine Circle Road, Brainerd,
Thank you.
Minnesota. I'm here as a volunteer, so that is my perspective. I'm a member of Bethlehem Lutheran Church, and I don't know if you guys know, but the churches take turns going in and volunteering at the warming shelter in the mornings. So first I'll tell you what we do. We have been a community partner, Bethlehem, with Bridges on 7th since you guys opened, right? And we sign up for a week at a time, usually 3-4 times throughout the season. And we go in, and we have 2 volunteers each morning from 7 to 8 a.m. We go in and help the guests get situated for the day. We make clean beds for the next morning, tidy up, vacuum, do some of the things that the regular paid staff could use some assistance doing. And so I don't have a lot of data, and you've heard the data. What I have is, what I know is what I've seen. I see mothers at the shelter. I see grandpas. I see grandmas. I'm a former teacher in Brainerd for many years. I've seen students at the shelter that I haven't seen since they were little. And I see people that are just in need of our support. And I have, again, I've done this for as long as they've been open. I have seen guests become very respectful when they're working on communicating with others of us in the community. A lot of responsibility is shown on their part. If we're short-staffed, if we're short on volunteers, many of the guests will help us make beds, get ready for the next day. And perhaps the most important thing that I have seen is relationships, and like Bill talked about, the trust being built. When the guests see us coming in, month after month, we build relationships. I have seen many of the guests out in the community and will say, "Hi, Kathy, we're getting our housing situated, we're getting moved in, we want to come back and pay it forward and do some volunteering at the shelter as well." So I see a real kind of pay it forward attitude from many of the guests that we work with. I believe that the warming shelter is a stepping stone into more permanent housing and permanent job situations for many, many people that need that support. I think that Brainerd as a community supports the shelter in many ways. When they are in need of items to be donated, the community steps up. Am I correct? People are very generous and very supportive of this program. My concern is, if there is no shelter, if it is not available for our guests, where will they go? Because they are in need, they are here, and they aren't going to vanish. So I would hope you could consider extending their year-round service.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much.
Hi, Ed Shaw, 521 North 9th Street, Brainerd. I'll offer a little different perspective. Everything that's been said so far is right on target. An issue that seems to be sometimes under the surface, if we have this shelter, we're going to attract a whole bunch of people from who knows where. They're going to be here no matter what. Even without a shelter, somebody who's homeless tends to gravitate to a larger community. That happens all over. It's a fact of life. There's more places to go in a larger community. If you're in a rural pillager, you'll probably drift to Brainerd if you don't have a home, whether or not we have a shelter or not. If we don't have a shelter, where will people be? They'll be out and about somewhere. They'll be under the overpass on the bike trail. They'll be here. They'll be there. That's why the city passed the ordinance banning camping in most areas. Understandably, we're not arguing that decision, but the people will be around here somewhere. If they're in the shelter, there'll be a lot fewer issues for the community, a lot fewer law enforcement interaction than dealing with people who are kind of out and about, backed into a corner, living under a bridge or who knows what. That's a recipe for trouble. That's a recipe for police calls. That's a recipe for all kinds of problems. One other thing to think about from a business perspective, you get somebody outside and, the weather at night in the summer isn't always lovely around here. Trust me, I've been out sometimes. They'll be out there. It's wet. It's cold. They'll be looking for a place to go. I have a business. Maybe they'll break into my business for a place. Understandably, if I were in that position, I would do it too. If we back people into a corner, not only is that frankly inhumane and immoral, it's going to create more conflict, more trouble, more of all the problems we want to avoid. The shelter will avoid all of that, having it open year-round. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Next up.
My name is Alyssa Johnson, and I am currently a person staying in the homeless shelter. Me and my fiance moved up here to Emily, Minnesota to run a motel, and it didn't end up working out. We ended up having to leave, and we chose to leave but we came across the shelter, and I mean, it has been huge. I don't even know what we would have done without it. I mean, we got here in October, and we got a house in the Neighbor to Love Coalition program, which I'm so thankful for. But had that not happened, I've even started college. I just started college in January, and it's given me the stability, like knowing that I have a place to sleep, that I've been able to do that. And I just can't imagine if I were to have come here at a different time in the year, you know what I mean? Or like, let's say I didn't have a place to go, and then what? I just all of a sudden I'm gonna have to try to be in college and be, you know what I mean? It's an experience that is definitely something that it changes the way that I view everything. I will always have something to do with the homeless community in the place that I live, and I just really would like to see this be open. I mean, they do a lot of good for people.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you. Next.
My name is Randy Wickham. My address is 710 South 8th. I am a woman in recovery. I am an executive director of a lived experience, homelessness lived experience advocacy network. I am a board member of the Central Minnesota Housing Partnership. I am a board member of the Central Minnesota Continuum of Care, and I am a new employee of the Bridge on 7th. I'm from Brainerd, and I had to leave the area to be able to get a safe place to stay. And I gathered all the resources and all the knowledge I could and brought it back to my community. When I came back here, I saw that this shelter was here, and it made my heart soar, because it gives a safe place for people to get their bearings straight. The shelter serves the most vulnerable people in our community, the very most vulnerable. And without that, where would these people go? Where would we go? They are us. They're a part of our community. We are them. Since the encampment ordinance has been passed, that limits it more. So if the shelter is closed in the summer and we're not allowed to camp, where are we supposed to go? That drives people farther into unsafe positions. It drives them farther into instability, and it makes them 10 times harder for them to have any sort of stable, any sort of successful future. I just ask that you guys really weigh the pros and cons and look at the positive impact it's brought in the community. look at all these amazing people that come here to support it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mandy. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Next. Anybody else? One last call. Do we have anybody else want to have the courage to come on up? It's pretty easy. We're a pretty easy bunch, I'm telling you. All right, I'm not hearing any, oh, we have, come on up. I sold it.
Hi, I'm Matt Carlgard. I'm on the board at Bridges of Hope. So I'm representing the shelter. I live just outside of city limits in unorganized territory. Just want to support everything. You know, I thought Jana did a really nice job of contextualizing the police calls that were reported, which I think is important, that it's a relatively low rate. And since we're concentrating a bunch of people in one area, it would make sense that there's a few more there that would have normally been spread around Brainerd. So the other point I would like to make is that with, you know, or emphasize, I guess, is with the camping bans in place, there's going to be more crime because people are not going to, they're going to camp, and then there's going to be police calls for that, right? Also consider the position of, let's say, a young woman, a vulnerable person, let's say, that doesn't have a homeless shelter to go to, doesn't have an opportunity to camp in town. They may go stay with somebody that would harm them, right? Because they have no other option, or take advantage of them. So it's going to create situations where people are in harm's way if there's not somewhere for them to go with a camping ban in place. So I think that's an important thing to consider. Personal note, I spent a lot of time riding my bike, and I've seen people camping on the bridge, underneath 210. I've seen people sleeping in their cars, and because they don't have any place to go. And so I think it's important that we have an open place for them that offers services, helps them get back on their feet. And again, emphasizing the fact that we have had 0 complaints from the public, I think that's really important. So I hope you'll consider letting it be open this summer for a trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Much appreciated. One last call for any speakers? Final call? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing at 6:32. I kind of want to explain what's going to happen next. We're going to kind of do our own deliberations. We'll be kind of talking back and forth amongst ourselves and with Mr. Kramvik. This is not a time to jump in. If you have opinions, kind of, we've closed that time. We may ask some of the guests to come up and clarify a few points. Sometimes we do that. But at this point, we'll begin to do our work. I want to thank everybody that came up and spoke tonight. I certainly appreciate it. With that, I'd like to open the floor to any discussion from commission members.
Mr. Chair, I'll jump in. So first, I just want to applaud Bridges for the past three plus years, and for all the lives they've touched in the community, and also the way they went about this. I was on council at that time, and when the original request was made, and raised a lot of community support, raised a lot of funds, had a lot of community partners that supported the shelter, and you weren't asking for public funds for any of this, and we're just looking for, as a great nonprofit, looking for permission from the city to perform this work. So I wanted to applaud you for that, and for how you've operated it since that time. As part of that initial, I want to give a little bit of history too. As part of that initial request, I felt like the seasonality was a feature of the application, and in the naming of itself as a warming shelter, that was presented as a feature of the shelter, and was almost marketed or promoted that way intentionally. It was intentionally not called a homeless shelter, not intentionally called other things. It was intentionally and specifically called a warming shelter for that seasonality. So just wanted to mention that as my recollection of that process. I know there was talk of being open to making other requests in the future. And I just want to kick off too, looking at the incidents, that was alarming, 119 police incidences. I know it was spread over 3 years, and at the time when we, approved the initial request, the out-of-town users of the shelter was a concern, a community concern, and I think that number was 30, again, spread over 3 years, so approximately 10 on average annually. And so considering going year-round, you can roughly or approximately double that if you were to extrapolate that out. So looking at about 20 out-of-town visitors per year, if you were to extrapolate that out. And that's concerning, and, just reading through the reports, there was obviously some concerns there with some of the arrests and the warrants that were associated with those. So I know we had examples of the positive and the impacts on the lives. I want to be able to provide both perspectives. I think that's fair. As a elected, I'm representing that ward and the neighbors in that area. So I wanted to present that as well. And as the liaison to council, I'm just one member, and so just want to bring that perspective that there may be other opinions at council too. So
Very good.
I'll leave my comments there and hear further. So
All right. Other members like to chime in? Well, I'll give my perspective on this. I think this is an opportunity for Brainerd to take responsibility. We're a regional center, and in being a regional center, we have the services. We have things that you don't find in small town. We have the help for people. This is part of who we are. Being a regional center is going to bring in business, it brings in commerce, and it brings in people. I personally see the number of people who are out of town as a pretty inconsequential number. To me, I see when the city council went ahead and approved the camping ban, really they became morally responsible for this issue, because you can't have just a stick. You have to have a carrot and a stick. You have to give people the chance to do the right thing. You have to give people to reach out, to seek help. And that's the biggest thing that's coming from the shelter. We see it maybe as beds. It really isn't. It's contact with a system that is designed to help them, designed to lead them forward. And we can, think of homeless people as in any which way we are, but we can't forget the fact they are our brothers, they are our sisters, they are our fathers, they are us, they are part of our community. And it could happen to any one of us. I know most of us, we don't think that way, but as it was said earlier, it could happen to anybody. And I think we'll always be judged by how we treat the least among us, the people with the least resources, the least abilities to fend for themselves. That's how we will be judged. And with that, I would strongly like to see a motion coming out of this commission in favor of the one-year pilot program. I think it's fair to the effort that's been forth. It's been fair. It's a fair response to the problem. And we have to understand, this is not just the city of Brainerd, having something dumped on our lap. This is a community-wide effort. This is the county. This is nonprofits in our community. This is churches in our community. These are concerned individuals in our community. What Brainerd can do is be the leader. We can step up and we can lead on this issue, and we can, help provide a solution. There is no total solution. Homelessness will always be part of the human condition. But again, I will be judged on how we respond to it. I would personally love to see a motion that would support a one-year trial. I am not in support of limiting this. So that's how I feel, and that's where I'm at. I should explain to people too one other item. We are an advisory group. That's who we are. We are not the last word on this. The city council is the last word on this. But the catch is the city council will not be taking testimony. That's not traditionally what they do on an issue like this. This is the chance for testimony. That's why it's very important that everybody has shown up. And regardless of what happens tonight with our decision, I urge all of you to remain committed, to remain in contact with your representatives, to remain in contact with the city council people, and let them know how you feel on this. All right, that's my 2 cents worth. And first of all, any questions or discussion before we move to a motion? Any other questions or discussions questions for James or anything? If not, I'm going to open the floor for a motion. Yes,
I have a
please.
question, and I don't know if we can bring Jana back up.
Sure we
but,
can, you bet. I'm volunteering,
So,
Jana.
obviously, it was introduced as a warming shelter, is what I'm gathering. Like, what other things do you have in place that are helping, reduce the number of incidents that are occurring? So
Sure.
is there connections with mental health programs? Is there connections with, drug and addiction programs and stuff like that, where you're facilitating these people to actually rehabilitate them
Yeah.
to, bring them back out into the world?
Yeah, that's absolutely a good question. So to start with, we want to be a safe, warm place to land, right? It's important. It's hard to address any of those issues you refer to if you don't have a place to sleep and if you don't have relationships. And so what our shelter provides is the opportunity for these folks to connect with not only our staff, but like you said, volunteers who have other expertises and maybe retired and have careers and expertise that they bring to the shelter. We have connected, I don't have all the statistics right in front of me, but we could provide that of the number of people we've helped connect with treatment. We've helped connect with mental health services. We work very closely with Open Arms Day Center, where they have peer specialists who work with these folks during the day, help with everything from putting in a job application to writing a resume to getting a job, all those steps. It's not as easy as just saying, hey, go get a place to live. There are a lot of things that lead up to that. So we absolutely are a hub, and we're the beginning point. And then we as Bridges of Hope, as the organization that owns and operates the shelter, that's what we're all about, is resource and referral, brokering relationships and connections to help people from a place where life's not so great to the place where they can be sustainable. Yep.
Good, excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dave, did you have a question?
No, she answered it right there, the only one that
Very
I
good.
had
Great.
was part of it.
Excellent.
Okay.
Other questions? All right, the floor is open for motions.
I'll make a motion to pass as, to give them the one-year shot at it, because it can be revoked if there's a lot of issues and stuff, and I agree with the camping. The people are gonna go somewhere, so let's control it in an area, and there's somebody there on staff to do that, so I will make that motion.
Very good.
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion on, I was going to turn to James too. Could
Yeah,
you-
just for clarification, it's a 3-year in the conditions the staff has presented. Would it still be 3 years for the overnight shelter, but then 1 year for the pilot program? So just like clarification on
That
that.
sound good to you, Dave?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Very good. So we're set on what the motion is. A motion has been made. We have a second discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that you pointed out that the nature of this group is a recommending body and that it'll go to council. And that, I was gonna make a motion to approve as staff recommended, for that reason, that there's gonna be more conversation, it's gonna go to council, and if council felt that, they wanted to have it year-round, they could have done that there, if we recommended the 3-year. So I'm gonna vote no on
right.
the motion that's on the table.
Very good. Other discussion?
I would echo what Tad has to say. I would say no to that as well.
We have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion before we call a vote? Not hearing that. Can we have a roll call? Stephanie, are we doing the roll call?
Peterson,
Yes.
Grasula,
Yes.
Gorham,
Yes.
Higgins,
No.
Erickson.
No.
Very good. So just a couple things before we split up here. As you know, this will go to the city council next. James, do you have an estimate to when this is going to end up at the city council?
Yeah, so the next city council meeting will be April 7th, Monday at 7:30 PM in the council chambers.
Very good. We're going to take a little recess because I think we're going to lose a good part of our crowd here. I would just ask, I know it's very tempting to come out of this and hang out in the hallway and chatter and carry on. If we could perhaps do it a little further away, it'll be a little quieter in here. So I'm going to give you all a minute if anybody needs to leave. But you are going to miss a very exciting meeting.
This is the best it's ever been.
Yeah. About once a year we get a good crowd. Yeah. Where we need the DJ music. Yeah, exactly. Dun, 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 dun. All right. There it is. All right, very good. Now we're going to find out who the real nerds are. Myself included. With that, we're going to move on to item 6B. This is a conditional use permit for a boarding house by My Neighbor to Love Coalition on Northwest 3rd. James, could you help us on that one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the applicant is currently in progress of constructing 2 12-plexes across the street and a boarding house. The 12-plex is in construction right now, and the site's been graded. The applicant can give an update on the schedule. Appendix A table of uses permits the construction of a mixed-use boarding house as a conditional use in the TN2 district. Boarding house by definition is a building other than a motel or hotel where, for compensation and by prearrangement for definite periods, meals or lodging are provided for 3 or more people but not to exceed 20. The proposed development meets the 10 off-street parking space requirement for the boarding house in the TN2 district and is included in the site plan. The applicant has proposed a 6-foot-high privacy screen shrub planting along all sides of the parking lot, which is a requirement in the landscape section of the zoning code. Shrubs on all sides may not be necessary if the trees and shrubs, kind of if you picture it in the side and rear yard, if they're left from the grading may impact the existing trees and shrubs on site, so they are included in the landscape plan. The city engineer has no concerns at this time with the stormwater and grading plan. KLD did submit kind of a preliminary grading plan that shows where the location of that stormwater retention basin would be based on the existing elevations. The applicant has proposed 5 new trees in the front yard with a mix of deciduous and evergreen tree species to meet the tree planting requirement. As of this writing, no parties have contacted the Community Development Department with concerns about the conditional use permit application for the mixed-use 8-bedroom boarding house. So with that, staff recommends approval of the request as presented with the following conditions. The applicant is allowed 18 months to start the project. A boundary line adjustment, which includes a stormwater retention basin, is approved prior to issuance of the building permit. So that stormwater retention basin would need to be on the same property as the boarding house. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Questions for James?
I've got questions.
Let's hear them.
So, James, I just had some notes here that as I was looking through the application. So you mentioned the landscaping, the deciduous trees that were there. As a planner, did you feel that was sufficient as far as
Landscaping
meeting the
plan.
requirements of the?
Correct, is sufficient. We don't know what the site's going to look like upon final grade. Certainly, it looks like some of the grading from the parking lot is going to impact some of the trees and shrubs around the property. And part of the requirement when you're abutting residential property, you do need to screen the parking lot, so it was included in the plan to do that.
Can I ask a follow-up, or should I want to take a turn?
Please.
So stormwater is as presented. Did the city engineer have concerns over, will this add to our stormwater?
So he did not have any concerns at this time. There would be, upon issuance of a building permit, a final stormwater plan would be required. SWIP plans as well as storm calculations would be required. They would have to meet our stormwater requirements in the city code, and that's really kind of directed by some of the MPC regulations with stormwater. So at this time, there's no concerns.
Okay, thank you.
I have one for
Dave,
James.
please.
Okay, so we just heard from Bridges of Hope, basically warming house, people are staying there. What is the difference between this and what this is going to be? Is this a long-term?
So boarding house is, and the applicant can speak, to what the model they're looking for, but certainly it's a little bit more long-term than like a warming shelter. Warming shelters are kind of a nightly basis. Certainly there's a max of beds that are in there. This could be something, and the applicant can speak to this, a month, 3 months, they have their belongings there kind of kept permanently in these rooms. So it's a bit different. The difference is it's not considered, each of these rooms aren't considered dwelling units like an apartment because they don't have their own bathroom facilities, don't have their own kitchens. So it's kind of shared kitchens, very similar to like what you'd see with a dormitory in college.
Sound good to you?
Yeah, it is what it is. It sounds
We'll have
good.
a chance with we'll have a chance with them in a moment here and to go into it a little bit deeper there. Any other questions for James? My question would be, how do you feel, is this the third time we've worked on this project? I know we've revisited it a few times. I've kind of lost track of how many times. But one of the things I remember on this is that there's always been the pledge to retain trees, and it's never quite worked out in terms of that. Are you more optimistic that things will be retained, or are we just to accept that we'll be starting over with plantings?
You know, based on what requirements we have in our city code for stormwater retention, it does make it difficult on a site like this where everything has to be regraded to meet those requirements. You can see when you see the solid lines coming from the dotted lines, those are all things that have to be regraded essentially to meet the stormwater requirements. So Sean, if you want to go down a little bit so we can kind of look on the south end there, you'll see the kind of the darker lines going around the parking lot. So those are all things that need to be regraded. You can't really pile soil up on a tree and have it survive in those instances. So in those instances, they'd have to be removed. So that's where I see it's really going to the extent of the property lines there. So, you know, you probably would around the parking lot certainly have some tree removal there. As you go a little bit further down the parking lot along the side property, you see that there's less of an impact on grading. So in those instances, you'd probably be able to save some trees in that area. So the original landscape plan did not have the shrubs going around the parking lot, and I did indicate to the applicant that that would be required if those trees and shrubs are removed.
Very good. A follow-up question would be on the last CUP that we went through. Is that construction now that's now under construction? The last phase that we approved, that's now under construction? Is that
Yeah,
right?
so the applicant can speak about the timeline. We have had conversations. It does need to start this summer for the next kind of phase of it with the boarding house, the 12-plex. Certainly a lot of construction has happened on the site with grading, stormwater, you know, that type of thing. So the project has been started in that aspect. But if there's continued no construction on the site, then certainly she'd have to reapply for a conditional use permit for those, for the boarding house and the other 12-plex.
In general, would you say you're happy with the pace of construction so far?
I do believe so. You know, there's been a bit of issues with maybe some stabilization on there. I'd have to check with the engineer to where they're at with it. I've heard, you know, some concerns about stabilization, sand, and that nature on the site. You know, again, I did kind of make it clear that it does have to start this summer in order to meet the code requirements.
Very good. Any other questions before we open the public hearing?
I do have one more question
Please.
for James. James, and if this was in the packet, I apologize, I missed it, but staff recommendation, item number 2, boundary line adjustment be required for the stormwater. Can you elaborate on that? Why necessitating the boundary line adjustment
And that's so that stormwater is on the same site as the boarding house. So right now, these are on 2 properties. So if you want to pull up the site map, Sean. I should say the aerial map from the county. That's in the findings of fact.
And the properties are owned by the applicant?
Both properties are owned by the applicant. So right now you have a boundary line that splits it, I believe. And based on some of my measurements, the stormwater would be kind of in the middle of where that property line is. So we just have to adjust it in order to make sure that the stormwater is contained on the same site as the building.
Thank you.
That help? Another quick follow-up, and this is infiltration, if that's what's happening with the stormwater retention. It's not being cast further down the hill. It's going to stay there.
It isn't. You know, I don't design stormwater typically in 100-year events or something like that. There's an outfall or something like that to make sure it's not flooding the adjacent property. But yeah, it's an infiltration basin to meet the stormwater requirements on site.
One thing you can say about the Jack Pine Savanna in the west part of town is that water doesn't stick around long, so that shouldn't be a concern there. All right. Without any other questions, I'll open a public hearing at 6:54, and I would like to invite the applicant to come up and tell us about this. And if you could touch on the progress of the overall project, that'd be great. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, you bet. Vicki Kinney, Lakeshore, Minnesota, Lakeshore, Minnesota. This is phase 4 of our Creekside Community Development. So we've currently have a 4-plex that we built in, residents moved in 2023. And then we are almost done completing our 12-plex. We're hoping to have residents move in by April 1st. So that's moving right along. We received grant funding, and so we are anticipating breaking ground as soon as we get our bids in. So hopefully May, as soon as possible, to be starting on our next 2 buildings. And that, as you already know, will be another 12-plex. and then mixed use, boarding house and some offices. So this is phase 4. So what we're wanting to do is actually develop that whole street, the rest of our property on 3rd Street. This is the only unit that would require a conditional use permit. And to answer your question about why a boarding house, we're trying to provide all different types of housing for, so we have single units, we have family units. We'd like to even build larger family units this next round. Some people do well in congregate living. Some people don't. Some people need that kind of family environment. I mean, that's the best thing for them. And so this is actually potentially permanent housing. So some people might, it might be just for a while, just a kind of a place to live for a few months until they can find something else. Or for some people, this could be home. And that's why we have a property manager apartment right next door. And so we may decide to provide meals. There's such a wide range of people that are currently without housing. If we had a state hospital open, maybe some of these people would be more served safely there. So we don't know. So we just want to be open that if people are needing a little bit more care, maybe they're needing meals, maybe they just want to pitch in and cook together. We want to have that openness and have a manager on site to help with any of those issues. So a boarding house can be temporary, but we're open for permanent housing. We want to, and we absolutely need, I'm also for the the warming shelter, the overnight shelter, absolutely needs, every community should have one. So we are so in favor of that. But it is not a solution. It's a solution to emergency housing. It is not a long-term solution. And so we absolutely need that for stage 1. But what we're doing is then providing the next stage 2. How do we get people into permanent housing so they can become stabilized, so they can address those issues, they can get jobs, they can deal with all those issues that maybe contributed to homelessness. So what we're doing is providing low rent housing for the people that can't afford most of the rents that are in the Brainerd Lakes area. So this is phase 4. And I get the trees, Dawn, I know. I mean, you saw the cluster we did keep, but with the terrain, the property, and having to do that large water retention pond, I mean, there was really no other way to develop the property and not having access to, the whole thing. We had to replat the whole thing because we couldn't build on 2nd Street, blah, blah, blah. So this is really the only way that we could develop that property. We do want to keep as many trees as possible, and so the other lots on there will not be requiring big retention ponds. There'll be we're hoping to do 1 or 2 fourplexes, maybe some duplexes, and we're looking at some of the accessory dwelling units as well for people that maybe live better in single units. Any questions?
Yes, any questions for Vicki?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Dave, we'll start with you.
Well, Vicki, I know the first one, we have ordinances in the city of Brainerd about keeping things up in grass. I know because I've gotten letters, even on a wooded parcel. I drive by the place almost every day, and if you have a property manager on site, that's what concerns me about all these. They're not doing a great job.
We don't have an on-site property manager. We have a property manager now, but not on site. For the fourplex, yes, and I do appreciate the city and the community being
There's
patient.
weeds growing, there's stuff I own rentals in town. We would be on our tenants for the way it looks right now. So that concerns me a little bit, I guess. That's the biggest.
Yeah. We do have, I don't know if you've noticed, our one unit that normally has a lot of bikes on there. We have cleaned that up and holding the line there. We're working with another resident that is now cleaning up things. You probably saw some garbage bags and so we're really tightening the ropes on what's strict. We've tried to be patient. We're trying to let people get stabilized and settled, but we've learned that we have to change things and tighten our ropes. So that is what we're doing now. The lawn, that's been a challenge this last year. We did put in a sprinkler system. We were kind of hoping we could maybe, with enough rain, we were doing okay. We planted a bee lawn. It's not a regular grass lawn. So it does take a little longer to establish, but then once it's established, it's better for the environment. So it does take a little bit more, but we did put in a sprinkler system last fall. So hopefully this summer the lawn and the bushes and flowers and stuff will look nicer.
Sound good, Dave?
Sure.
All right. Ted?
Thank you. Hi, Vicki.
Hi.
In the application, I think you had requested 18 months.
Yep.
And I just wanted if you could comment on why the additional time?
Sure.
Clarify that.
We need funding. The only way that we're going to be able to build this is if we receive a grant. I'll be writing the grant this next month. They make a decision in December. And so if we receive the funding, then we can proceed. But of course, we can't start in December. So then we would have to wait to the spring to start. So that's the reason why we need a little bit more time. If we don't get the grant, this won't be happening because we obviously do not have the funds to keep going without that. So that's the reason. We'll know in December if this whole block will be able to be developed or not.
Other questions for Vicki? Just to try to make this question quick. What's been the biggest unexpected challenge in the first, 3 years of the project now? What's been the biggest unexpected challenge? Just out of curiosity.
Unexpected. Okay, that's different then. I could say the city council.
Like when it was the challenges that none of us were talking about when we first approved it. What has come up? Just out of curiosity.
For challenges, I would say, we've had some growing pains ourselves, just learning. We're a new nonprofit. Our heart, we're big hearts and really wanting to help people. We've just learned okay, we do have to tighten things up. I think that was different. We are very involved. I know we've been challenged by some people on the council about expecting that we should be proving ourselves instead of just we are proving ourselves by providing low rent housing. That should be enough. That's what we're doing. We're not claiming that we're supportive housing, but we are being supportive to our tenants. I think we're more involved with our tenants than any other landlord in Brainerd. So I guess we're not surprised by the level of involvement. We help with budgeting, financial management. We help teach life skills. Maybe we didn't quite realize we'd be as involved with teaching how to clean apartments. That some people like to collect things. And so there's been some growing pains there that we've had to learn to help a little bit more. I guess that's probably it. We've received a lot of support. And I know it's tough. We've asked people to please be patient as we're working with our residents. One of our residents just 2 weeks ago had said to me, she's been there now 18 months. Their original residents that moved in 18 months ago are still the same residents today. So which is, to me, that speaks a lot. Then those persons had, 20 plus, 30 plus years of homelessness and just said to me, I'm just now starting to feel settled. And it's taken that long. So it's tough. And so we do ask people to be patient with us as we're learning, as we're growing, we're making a difference in people's lives. And some of the things in the trauma experiences that people are going through and struggling through, it doesn't happen overnight. It starts with a home. But then we have to address other things as it goes, and it does take a while. It takes a while to learn those skills. We just expect, it should be cleaned, everything should be just so. It does take some time. So we do ask for some patience there as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, we may have questions later, but thank you for now.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
I do have one, if I may.
You
don't probably have to answer it. I'm just wondering what the price point is for the rents, like on
Sure.
exactly, the ones that you've got now
Yeah.
and the new ones in process and the boarding house.
Sure. But the boarding house, we're not 100% sure yet, so it depends on how much we can afford. We're trying to keep our costs as low as possible, but we are a nonprofit, and we're trying not to operate in the red. So it's been tough. But our current fourplex, we start rent at $450. And they pay their own utilities. With the next building, they're slightly smaller. The 2-bedroom units start at $600. The other units start at $425 because we're paying water and sewer to save them that fee, and an extra $25 for if they want internet. But typically about $425. And these are month-to-month rent, and we do that on purpose because we don't want people. Some people are afraid to commit. This is a big step. When you haven't had housing. So this gives them a chance to just try it out. Let's just see how you do. That helps them. And then it gives us the opportunity too, if somebody is not compliant and not following our rules, we have a handbook. We have neighborhood association meetings that are required. And if somebody's not cooperating or they're not willing to, we of course give them as many chances as we possibly can, but then it gives us a way to terminate the lease without an eviction.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking that question. I was going to ask it and I forgot. All right, we're going to open it up to anybody else. We'll kind of follow by the same sort of guidelines. We'll do name and address. If we can keep it to a few minutes, that'd be terrific. So I'm going to invite anybody who would like to come up and speak on the matter.
Ed Shaw, sorry I'm speaking twice in the same meeting, but anyway, I haven't been here for a while. And I certainly support this proposal. this kind of housing structure used to be more common decades ago, but we still have them. I think Over the Sawmill Inn is still what you'd call a boarding house. They have individual rooms and a common bathroom. I don't know if Bergstallers in Northeast is still operating. That certainly was around for many years. They are allowed by the zoning ordinance, so this isn't a new thing, and Our Neighbor to Love isn't the only place trying it, and it certainly provides affordable housing for single people who couldn't afford a regular apartment. Their rates are certainly below market rate, and I'll even confess, years ago, back when I had hair, I briefly lived in a boarding house type setting, didn't need a full-sized apartment. It worked for me. I turned out semi-normal. Well, at least I think so. So I think it's a valuable part of the community, and I certainly hear what Mr. Peterson's saying. You can have some struggles with tenants. I'm in the rental business, and I have to kind of be on top of my tenants about yard and who knows what sometimes, but where will these people be otherwise? There'll be a lot less problem in a house and outside of a house all around, so it's a win-win. Better to have someone in a house, even if they're not a perfect tenant, than out on the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Hi, Mike Higgins, 1801 Mill Avenue and 1511 Northern Pacific Center Road. I guess I'd just like to say that I support this type of housing. I have a brother that was incarcerated for 20 years in Michigan and got out of prison very quickly. And we ended up getting him in a very similar housing situation where he's got some care and can be taken care of. And his quality of life, even though he's about the age of a 12-year-old mentally, his quality of life in the home that he's in is a lot better than where he was. But I guess as a somebody that gets talked to a lot about my properties, I guess I would just ask that fair's fair, that this project should be held accountable just like any other project in the city of Brainerd. And I think it's a great nonprofit and it's a great program, but we still have to hold everybody accountable to the same standards. So thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Next up, do we have another? We do.
Good evening, Mike Duval, 468 Tyrol Drive. I like the vision of the applicant. I don't dispute that, and I'm not disputing the need, as we heard already in the previous agenda item. So I believe that this permit application should be denied for three basic reasons. Number one, I don't think the boarding house and adjoining apartment meet the density standard for the TN2 district. The second is that the applicant hasn't really demonstrated that they can timely complete the existing development that they've already got, resulting in undesirable impacts to the neighborhood adjoining. And then thirdly, the proposed development does not conform to the guidance in the comprehensive plan. I'll speak to each of these separately. As far as the zoning district density standard, the proposed development doesn't meet that standard for 9 to 20 dwelling units per acre. So the definition of a dwelling unit in the ordinance is a building designed exclusively for residential occupancy, and it has specific items: cooking, sleeping, and sanitary facilities are included within the dwelling unit. Okay, and your definition then also expressly clarifies that motels, hotel, and boarding rooms are not dwelling units by themselves. So in other words, by your definition then, a dwelling unit would include a boarding house because it has the bedrooms, and the drawings of the proposed development pretty much clearly show you have bedrooms, and then you have common spaces for cooking. You get the bathroom and living spaces. And I just want to also point out that a dwelling unit's not a use, right? It's not a residential use. It's not a commercial use. It's not an industrial use. But a dwelling unit, it's independent and of the allowable use, and that's apparent in the definition. So when you look at the zoning district standards for TN2, that's clearly identified in the table of standards. And so thus, this proposed boarding house and the attached apartment is really a two dwelling unit building on basically a little under 2/3 of an acre, 0.62 acres. That's 3.2 dwelling units per acre. It's far below what the standard is for the TN2 district. And so as such, it really doesn't qualify for CUP. It qualifies for a variance. It would require a variance because you're not meeting the basic standard of that zoning district. The second point is that the applicant hasn't demonstrated they can finish the development in a timely manner. If you drive by and look at the site, and some of you have, or if you view it from Google Maps, it's very clear. There's nowhere else in the greater Brainerd area where you got a site torn up like this, of this scale, this size. It's the largest disturbed area in the Brainerd and Baxter area when you cruise around on the aerial photography. And the adjoining neighborhood is poised to enter a third year of blowing sand and dust from the site. The site stabilization was initiated after complaints to the city and has been further hampered by the fact that there's drought. So it's hard to grow grass in sand, right? You're now being asked to consider a request to extend the duration of a CUP for this site up to 18 months. And that's in the findings of fact to allow the applicant to further capture grants and donations to fund the good work that they do. But the unintended consequences of obtaining a CUP before the applicant has the resources to begin and complete the development is an incentive to break ground on the project so that they can meet the timeline of the clock that's ticking down. I believe the applicant may be currently overextended, although I'm encouraged to hear that the build-out plan and such is likely to be taking place this summer for the current development site. But I worry about the change of focus from the work that needs to still be done there and worried about redirecting limited resources away while we have this large disturbed area. And finally, the proposed development doesn't conform to the comp plan. The current comp plan guides our community toward creating housing and lots of housing. Goal 1, Policy 5 states that ensure an adequate supply of quality and affordable housing units for current and future residents. And the applicant is trying to take a bite out of some of that need, but I emphasize the adequate part of that as well. The 2020 Crow Wing County Housing Study identifies a shortage of available housing across all income and demographic groups, and there's an alarmingly projected shortfall of 4,800 housing units by 2033. And Brainerd's share you could extrapolate very easily as a third of that shortfall, which really equates to 100 housing units that are needed a year to close that gap, and we're nowhere near that by 2033. The proposed site under the TN2 zoning class would support up to 13 dwelling units on that site and many more by CUP if they were to come in so a higher density. As proposed, it's vastly underdeveloping the site, potential that is suited for high-density multifamily housing on a scale comparable to what's just been recently completed, the lofts on Novotny and Brainerd, and the proposed 805 Laurel project. That's kind of what this development or this zoning class was envisioned. Prior to the current zoning districts that are in our ordinance, we used to have many more residential districts, and this was once zoned in R3, which was very high density housing. And we're now basically underdeveloping this site when we have a great housing need, and that's not where our comprehensive plan is sending us. So with that, I respectfully ask that you deny the conditional use application for you tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. All right, who would like to be next? One last try. Do we have a next? I know somebody's almost ready to stand up, right? Somebody's almost ready to stand up. All right. I will we'll close the public hearing at 7:14. And as we did before, we'll turn to discussion amongst commission members. Open to ideas, questions?
Could I ask Mr. Chair, could I ask a clarifying question of staff? James, so, given the application, the underlying zoning, is this use, this is compatible with the TN2 zone via this, interim or conditional use?
So boarding houses are conditional uses in the TN2 district. Certainly density was brought up. That was questioned ahead of time as well. Staff did provide an opinion on some of the density requirements of TN2. Certainly when you look at the overall site plan, I can see, opinions on, is it as dense as what the purpose and intent of the TN2 district is? Perhaps not. We, certainly good or bad, we have parking minimum requirements for these types of uses, which certainly take up more space on a lot. And then because of that impervious surface, you have stormwater requirements as well. So could the site be more dense? Perhaps. Boarding houses are listed under commercial uses in the allowed use table. Within the definition, it mentioned hotels, motels. So those are also commercial uses in our allowed use table. So for instance, they're very comparable to each other, how you maybe look at, dwelling units. If you were to take, say, a hotel on a TN2 district, kind of under the same format of interpretation of the zoning code, you could have a hotel on a 2-acre lot in the TN2 district consisting of 1 dwelling unit. Certainly not meeting those requirements of the 9 dwelling units per acre. So I do see that as an issue if that's an interpretation going forward. Staff's interpretation is the minimum dwelling units should probably be used for residential developments, large-scale residential developments, making sure that the lot sizes are appropriate. Also, my neighbor to love's 12-plex, strictly residential. It starts to get a little bit of a hindrance if we're looking, at commercial and mixed uses and how those would correlate to those minimum design requirements. But again, certainly when you look at the site plan, could it be more dense? Perhaps. So with that, I can, answer any other questions.
Thank you.
I'm going to just jump in real quick. Sean, is it possible that we could get a global or a little Google Earth picture here? Could we take a look at the site? If we could get something current so we can kind of all, it's going to be the sandbox on the right-hand side. Is that where we're going? Is that agreed to be a fairly current picture of current depiction of what's going on, or is that old? I'm just trying to kind of get. What I'm trying to get at is what are we looking at here? What condition are we in here?
There's a building up there now.
There's a building up there now. So this is old.
It's very old.
This is old. And so I put a whole lot of stock in this. It really almost looks like a CG sort of thing there. But okay, all right, that helps a little bit there.
Well, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
To put it in context, since I'm a licensed builder also,
You are.
it takes time to build these structures, to the size that they've got and everything. And then, you've got seasons depending on when you start it and stuff like that. That does not concern me about the time frame whatsoever. James, I'm a little bit confused of why we have a minimum in some of these zones on your property. Why can't you build a single-family home on this if you wanted to? That's just one of my things that I guess I'm trying to struggle why I have no problem with it, I guess. In a boarding house, I think I heard it was gonna be 24 people living there, or a possibility of 24. How many? Just a quick 8? Okay, plus another, we are in reality meeting that density, even though the term or the definition of a boarding house is different. There will be, basically make it an apartment, call it an apartment then.
All right, I can see that perspective. Any other questions, comments?
And
Ted?
another one, I guess I can defer.
Go ahead,
Spoke
Ted.
once. Sean, can I have you scroll down to the rendering of the structure? Page 57. Just going back to not to get too nerdy, as you mentioned earlier, on the zoning update that we did in 2022, we kind of moved from more of a traditional zoning ordinance to more of what we call a form-based code. And my understanding of that is, it's less of an emphasis on the use of the property, which I think was mentioned, but more on the form. And, given that this is technically a commercial use, the way it is listed in our table of uses in a residential area, I just wanted to have us consider maybe adding a condition, and I asked James to provide me a little bit of language here that I'll read, but just add a condition that we require them to do 2 of any of these things from our single-family detached residential structure standards. I just look at this rendering and it's a beautiful building. It just looks a little plain for that neighborhood. And so, and there's a list here of, I was thinking maybe shutters. If we could require maybe some ornamental shutters, some alternative side, there's a list here, so covered, and this is again from the single-family detached residential structure standards. So again, given that we're focused on the form, what it's gonna look like, maybe some shutters would be good, but, a porch, window shutters, covered entry, alternate siding, some texture to it. So, and it, I think the language that I was asked James to provide me comes from that, and you can pick any 2. So that would be, and I can try to frame that into a motion, but
Basically,
adding 2 elements from the
design elements.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it, design elements.
And I don't think those are too intrusive. There's a list there that they could pick from, but I guess I just wanted to enter that into the
That's
discussion.
a fair point. Other questions or comments?
Well,
Yeah, Dave?
I'm gonna comment back on that, being, it is intrusive, because all those things you just mentioned cost money, and they're trying to do affordable housing. That's detrimental to that. You can do a lot with paint colors and just changing directions and colors of sidings without adding porches and all these facades that you're talking about.
Well, no-
Literally cool costs. And I just have a hard time always dictating. That's why if you weren't here the last meeting, I wanted you guys to tell me what your favorite looking commercial spot is in Brainerd, right? Everybody's is probably gonna be different. And that's nothing wrong with that. I guess that's the point I was getting at. So I might like something, you may not. Why do we get to pick exactly the way we want you to build your building? I have a problem with that, I think. You can drive out around any street in this town, every house is different. Don't we want some diversity?
I would push back a couple ways. First of all, not every house is different. If you drive through the north side, you can see certain houses from certain areas that are replicated. They're replicated. You go, oh, that house, there it is again. And I think we put flexibility in our design standards. We're saying pick 1 or 2 elements. We're not saying, this is it, that's what a house looks like. We're saying pick elements. And because I think there's a tendency to create housing sometimes, low-income housing, that becomes, it becomes a little ugly.
That's how you get low income.
Well, the trick is how can we provide dignity on a budget? And I think that's the trick we're trying to do. But let's not get too lost in the weeds here. Let's continue on the discussion here. Any other thoughts on, I guess we're getting closer to asking somebody to make a motion here, but any other questions or comments before we get to that stage?
Yes, just for clarification.
Please.
It sounds like there's been previous projects that are still kind of ongoing and stuff like that, and then this is basically an additional start to a new project? Okay. But then with those previous projects, like there's still ongoing issues and time frame that they're trying to get caught up on. I would say a lot of this, to me, feels like we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. Saying that we're applying for the CUP, but then still waiting on the funding, giving them 18 months. I don't know, it just feels like it's not the right timing for this.
I appreciate that, and that's one of my concerns too. One of my thoughts here now is maybe we need a 6 month of catch-up, 6 month of consolidating the gains that have been made before we open up another project. But those are my thoughts.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Could we get an update on the timeline from either staff or the applicant or both?
I think we should. Vicki, would you like to step up and give us a timeline here? And James, if you have anything to chip in, please do.
Good, because I also wanted to let you know there are 2 front porches and a couple different textures on the building too. It's hard to see in the picture, so I just want to let you know that. So actually, our first phase 1 is completed. The only thing that's not is the grass. I mean, we are still growing a lawn, and the plants, of course, our perennials and bushes are still small. They're growing. It takes, 3rd year they leap. So hopefully it'll be looking nicer. We really want the properties to look nice, and we have a really nice landscaping plan, a community garden, a park, playground. So we are in development of the 12-plex. Broke ground in the late summer, early fall, so it's not too unreasonable to think that this project is not completed yet. They're building all winter. We're moving in soon, and we'll be doing landscaping this spring and summer. So I don't think our timeline is unreasonable. That seems pretty fast to me for building a 12-plex. To have it built in 8 months, and we're working on landscaping. The next 2 buildings will be breaking ground this spring and working on them throughout. Hopefully, we'll getting them done this next winter. Again, that seems pretty reasonable, and getting 19 more housing units built. So phase 4 wouldn't even be starting until 2026. So we'll have been completed with phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 by the time we break ground for phase 4. And so, of course, we prefer higher density. We'd love to be able to build more, but it is a funding problem. And that's what we're relying on is funding, donation. We get no government, state or federal funding at all. And so we're just relying on donations and grants. So we are kind of at the mercy of when we can get funding so we can build.
So specifically, I think I probably just missed it there. When will the first 3 phases be completed?
The first 3 phases should be completed by the spring of 2026, because we're breaking ground this spring. But because they're 2 buildings, they're not going to break ground immediately at both. They'll probably start the 12-plex and then break ground on the next building.
Let's make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Phase 1 is done.
Phase 1 is done.
Phase 2 done?
Well, just about. We're moving them in like 2 weeks, but we still have landscaping to
So
finish.
phase 2 is not done.
Not done yet.
Phase 3?
Phase 3 will be starting in May.
Phase 3 starting May, and this is phase 4 we're
This is
talking
phase
about
4,
tonight.
yes.
Okay, just want to make sure we're all kind of on the same page
Yeah.
here. Anything to add to this, James, or is that pretty accurate in terms of what we're describing here?
And that's what I've heard from the applicant previously.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Vicki, as long as we have her up here? If not, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
And further discussion, or if somebody feels daring to make a motion, I'm willing to entertain that as well.
I'll make a motion to pass it as per staff recommendations.
All right, and would that be the conditions of the design elements? I think that's how, so you're not going to add the design elements to it?
That was what I was suggesting be requested, but it sounds like from the applicant, they are incorporating some of those already, so I would second the motion made.
Okay, very good. Any discussions on the motion as it is right now? If not, let's do a roll call vote on this one. Stephanie, when you're ready.
Peterson,
Yes.
Grasula,
Yes.
Gorham,
No.
Higgins,
No.
and Erickson.
Yes.
3-2. All right. We are. This is moving ahead. Next steps for the applicant, James.
So again, this is a recommending body. This will be heard at the next city council meeting on April 7th at 7:30 p.m. in the council chambers.
Very good. I want to thank everybody who spoke tonight. I do appreciate your time. Very good. Thank you. All right. We are moving on to 6C. We're looking for a conditional use permit.
Sorry to interrupt. This is the part where I'll recuse myself.
Very good. All right. So we are looking at 6C, conditional use permit for vehicle, trailer, and equipment sales at 1801 Mill Avenue. James, can you bring us up to speed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appendix A, Table of Uses, allows for auto and trailer dealerships and outdoor equipment service sales and rentals with an approved conditional use permit in the GI district. The facility must meet the following criteria according to the allowed use section. Sales area is limited to 50% of the gross floor area of the principal use. Sales area is proposed in the site plan is 44% of the gross floor area. Outside sales areas are fenced and screened from view of neighboring properties and any public rights of way. The proposed sales area is completely fenced with a row of mature red pine trees along the fence line. However, the trees do not provide screening from view of the neighboring properties and public's right-of-way. Staff certainly sees the need where you'd want a sales area to not be screened from the public, so I will have a recommendation based on that. However, the property has historically been a heavily utilized manufacturing, warehousing, and distribution facility that has not been screened from the public historically. All display storage areas must be paved and must comply with requirements from the city engineer. City engineer has no concerns. The proposed use shall organize vehicular access and parking to minimize traffic congestion in a residential neighborhood. The proposed use will not significantly increase vehicle traffic on Mill Avenue. This is something we've been discussing with the county as well. This property is zoned general industrial and can accommodate off-street parking and loading as currently constructed. The Community Development Department recommends approval of the conditional use permits for 1811 Mill Avenue as presented, and then further recommends that the screening requirements in the zoning code should be removed for outside sales areas. It's kind of note, sales areas are meant to be viewed by the public. Screening could be added back if necessary through a conditional use permit process. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Very good. Questions for James? Just a quick question in terms of the general signage of it. What would be, and maybe this is a question for the applicant, but will they be restricted at all in terms of a sign on the highway, anything like this, or just out of curiosity?
Signing and lighting, if there are any additions to that, essentially would just have to meet the criteria of the zoning code as presented. The applicant did not let staff know if there were going to be any additions, but certainly could speak to that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Without any other questions for James, I'll open a public hearing at 7:31 and would invite the applicant to come on up. Tell us a little bit about your project.
Hi, Mike Higgins, 1801 Mill Avenue. I've got a tenant that's requested to put trailers, little tow-behind trailers, and rent an office from me. He needs a properly zoned site for his dealership application through the state of Minnesota. I also have a couple other people that have requested recently to be able to sell equipment and or possibly some little cabins or little outbuildings. So I just figured I'd cover everything with this CUP, and I guess I'm available for any questions if you have them.
Questions for Mike? Kat, please.
Just to maybe address the signage question, I forget who brought that up.
Well,
Was that your question?
that was my question, but why don't you go ahead and bring it up? You got the floor.
Well, just that, how, would there be any signage?
I guess I never thought about it. With the 220,000 square foot building, right now I have one 4x8 sign out. I'm gonna guess that by code I can probably put a sign up. We would get a sign permit or talk to staff about whatever we need to do. But it's not, it's probably something that hangs on the fence in front of the trailers.
Mike, I have a question. Are the vendors renting from you, or will you be in the business of equipment sales?
No, they're
curiosity.
renting. They're just tenants.
They're just tenants?
Yep.
Okay, just a rental tenants then. And do you expect more than one to be using this place then? You expect
Possible.
Possible, okay.
Hopefully.
Okay, very good. Just one more question there. Trailers, we talking like pop-up tent trailers? We talking like industrial?
No, a little pull behind your pickup, haul your lawnmower trailers.
There you go. Thank you. That's the question I had. Other questions for Mike? Not seeing them. I'll thank you. We may ask you back for any further questions. And I'll open the floor, the mic for anybody else who would like to come on up and speak on this matter. Well, we're not seeing it, so I'm going to close our public hearing at 7:33 and open the floor to discussion. Any discussion? Any questions? All right, not hearing a whole lot. Then I guess we're just waiting for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the recommendation as presented with the addition of the recommendation that screening requirements in the zoning code be removed from outside sales areas.
All right, very good.
I'll second it.
And we have a second. Any discussion on that? Not hearing that? All right. Stephanie, let's do another roll call.
Peterson.
Yes.
Grasula.
Yes.
Gorham.
Yes.
And Erickson.
Yes.
Very good. Next step for the applicants, James.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this will be heard at the next City Council meeting on April 7th at 7:30 p.m. in the council chambers.
Can we please go in front of everybody else?
Very good. And I'll let you take that up with the city council on that one. We don't have to touch that one. All right, we're on to number 7. We're on to unfinished business. We're going to review the data center ordinance. James, would you bring us up to speed on the issue, please?
Thank you.
I should say on our issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this has been reviewed numerous times by the Planning Commission. We've been altering, adding things. Our Public Utilities Director was here at the last meeting to provide some recommendations based on what has been already provided to the Planning Commission. If you want to pull the ordinance up, Sean, staff highlighted those sections. There's questions about backup generators, so kind of clarifying that curtailment of power supply or voluntary shutdown of power is not considered to be a power outage. To be running those generators. You'll see in the hazardous waste plan was changed to the operator rather than developer as requested by the Public Utilities Director. Next part, the water and wastewater plan. Prior to approval, the developer shall apply for a sewer extension permit with the MPCA and submit a water and wastewater plan for review by the Public Works Department and Public Utilities Department. Certainly from a community development perspective, we want to see a review by the public utilities to make sure that water and wastewater are applicable. You know, that is continuing to be less potentially of an issue with some of these data centers as opposed to what they were in the past, using a significant amount of water. But certainly if it's not going to work with the water and wastewater plan, the Planning Commission should know that. I'm not sure what goes into applying for a sewer extension permit from the MPCA, so that may be, a little bit more than what we typically require in the zoning code, so something for the Planning Commission to consider. And then last part, prior to approval, loads over 1 megawatt in capacity will be responsible for having a system impact study completed by the appropriate power transmission owner operator in the area. Again, could be quite a bit of work going into this. There's certainly other data centers. CTC would be an example of where they'd have to have data center storage capability at their site. So Planning Commission can consider whether 1 megawatt should maybe be that threshold. I think it's appropriate to potentially do that to make sure that we can provide power before granting that CUP. But maybe it's a different number than that 1 megawatt number. And with that, I will open up to any questions.
Yeah, looks like you have a question. Yeah, no questions? All right. Any questions down that way? All right. So I just want to ask a question kind of based on Commissioner Norwood's letter from this afternoon. And I was a little confused because he was talking about moving it to 3 megawatts, and that almost seemed like lowering the threshold. So I was a little confused by that. What was your takeaway on his letter?
So I think that would maybe potentially more appropriate. I know the data centers that we've been reviewing in the last couple of years here have been more in that 20 to 25 megawatt capacity. So when you look at 1 megawatt, I'm not sure where that looks at, for some of the other data center needs of other standard businesses in here. So I know Commissioner Norwood talked about maybe a 3 megawatt capacity where you'd have to do that prior to the Planning Commission meeting. So I think that may be appropriate. Public Utilities Director was the 1 megawatt, so it's kind of up for discussion and recommendation from the Planning Commission.
All right, thank you. Other questions for James on that? I guess I don't have a question at this point. We don't have other questions? I mean, are we good? Do we feel like we've done the work on this? My personal opinion is F is probably the thing we kind of have to make sure we're comfortable with F and with the energy plan there. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on 1 megabyte versus 3?
I guess my thought would be if that's what the Public Works Director recommended, that's probably what we should go with. He knows his system much better than we ever will.
Yep, there we go. There we go. I think this is an important element too, because we have to understand that, and I'm sorry I missed the last meeting with I was caught up in community theater once again. I didn't have the chance to be here at the last meeting here and to discuss this because we have a BPU who, they have goals, they have mandates that they're supposed to set, moving towards renewable energy and moving towards a carbon-free model. And what this gets down to me is we have to make sure our right hand and our left hand are working well together. That we're not, setting standards and then going out and handing out permits that are going to make hitting the standards impossible. That are going to potentially raise the cost down the line. So I would hope that F would include some consideration for the overall plan. Do we have a sign off for BPU to sign this off, or are they going to sign off on F, or?
Yeah, so they would be providing a recommendation after the system impact study's been completed. I guess the last few crypto facilities or data center facilities, they've almost approached BPU before the city on things. So trying to make sure that they could secure the power at the price that they're looking at, and then coming to the city for conditional use permits or the development agreement with the EDA. So that's been the process so far. Energy is kind of the most important thing to them, and then trying to figure out the city aspect and land use permits after that. So very high on their priority list. So I think having this in there would be no issue.
And so what you're essentially saying is by the time it gets to us, the energy issue has been discussed.
That has been in the past, yes.
Okay, very good. Those are the questions I have. Any others? If not, do we have I guess, are you looking for a motion to move this? What would you like, James, out of this? What are you thinking? Or do you
It could be a recommendation to move forward with the public hearing at the next meeting.
All right, so can we have a motion here to move this ahead to the public hearing phase?
So move.
Second.
I'm going to give the second to the new guy, Mr. Higgins. Thank you very much. All right, any more discussion? If not, I would say on this one I'm good with. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. So, do we expect to see this in April?
Yep, this would be at the next meeting in April for a public hearing.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right, that moves us to our public forum. This is a chance for the public to opine on any matters that are not on tonight's agenda. Time limits may be imposed. And with that, I'll open the public forum at 7:41. Look around the room. Oh, there we go. Mr. Marone.
Nice to see you guys.
Likewise.
Hey, Chuck Marone, 616 North 4th Street. Very nice to see you all. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't make the meeting last month. I also know you guys have a lot going on, so I will try to be quick. There's two things I wanted to bring up in relation to last month, but also just in general. The first one's about street vacations. I was a little surprised when not only you got a recommendation from staff that everything was cool with the street vacation, but that the street vacation conversation, while it wasn't part of the request that you got, was part of the discussion and the conversation. I just want to bring two things up about street vacation. The first one is when we think about public safety, what we talk about often is response time. How quickly can we respond to a call? How quickly can we respond to an incident? If you are in a city like Baxter, the way they deal with response time is to make streets really, really wide so that you can drive really fast down them. That's not what you do in an urban city. In an urban city, you need to make streets narrower, you need to slow traffic down. The way we deal with response time is to have a lot of redundancy in the street grid. In Baxter, you'll have collector streets that go into local streets, dead-end cul-de-sacs. Everything's kind of a dead end. In a neighborhood like North Brainerd or Northeast Brainerd or South Brainerd, the way you get around that is not to have dead-end cul-de-sacs, it's to have lots of connectivity. If the fire truck's going down one street and it's narrow and tight, they can't get by, there's all kinds of other options to get to where you're going. Every time we close a street, you dramatically decrease that capacity. You really impair public safety in a city like Brainerd. If someone was coming to us and saying, we want to vacate a cul-de-sac somewhere, vacate every cul-de-sac. I mean, that would be good public policy to me. But when we're talking about an urban street, a gridded street, it's a really, really bad idea from a public safety standpoint. The other thing is, if we look at state statutes on vacations, they talk very clearly about the conditions under which a city would vacate a street. And they talk about it being something where the public has a benefit to that vacation. When we look at a public right-of-way, what that is it's land dedicated to the public for a public use. If we're going to give up a right-of-way a right-of-way that has a public street on it, has public sidewalks on it, has public utilities that go down it, whether they're overhead utilities or underground utilities, whether they do today or possibly will in the future because they're part of a gridded network, even if we retain an easement so we can go back in, or even if we retain some type of right to go across it, what is the benefit to the public for doing that? What is the public gain from giving up something that, in a sense, we have and we own and we occupy? It's a really high standard that didn't come up. It wasn't part of the discussion. It wasn't part of the staff recommendation or the attorney recommendation, but it's something that I think this Plan Commission should know about, should be aware about, and should be prepared to talk about when that comes up again. There are a lot of places where entities that own lots of property would love to be able to accumulate and aggregate property by vacating streets. I can think of in North Brainerd, just the hospital and a bunch of churches as examples. And this is really, really bad overall for our neighborhood. So I want to bring that up. I want to make that part of your conversation. The second thing has to do with housing. On the same application that you reviewed last month, it wasn't part of the preliminary plat discussion, but it was, again, ancillary to it. And I just want to talk about the housing issue. We spent a great deal of time on this commission years ago coming up with an ordinance to deal with two issues. Number one, the housing shortage, which you heard a lot about tonight. We don't have enough housing. We're losing housing. We need to have a lot more. We need to have hundreds of units more every year being built just to close the gap that we've got now. We also were dealing with kind of the, I'm just going to call rolling blight or the cancerous growth of parking lots throughout our core neighborhoods. We can look at the school district doing this. We can look at the hospital doing this. We can look at churches doing this. This blight has an ongoing kind of negative feedback loop because every time you buy up houses and expand parking, we not only lose that housing, but the parking devalues the next line of housing. It actually makes that next line of housing less valuable, less desirable, and that reinforces it because when it becomes less desirable and less valuable, it's cheaper to buy up and make into parking, thus allowing like the next rung and the next rung and the next rung. We made a recommendation to the council, and I hope you listened to the council meeting or at least get feedback about the council meeting because it did come up there and it was part of the conversation there about how that ordinance in particular, the idea that we would eliminate two houses, replace it with one, there'll be more net bedrooms, all this kind of stuff. It really went against not only the spirit of what we were trying to do, but it went against the overall conceptual idea of retaining our housing stock and allowing the neighborhood to mature, not be kind of ripped apart for parking. So I wanted to come here and just emphasize those two things for you. I think they're very important to not just North Brainerd. I think they're important to the entire city. Please, please, please slow down and think deeply when we get into street vacations and slow down and think deeply when we're removing homes. Both of those things, we've taken great efforts to make sure are not going to be part of our development approach here. We should be building up neighborhoods, not letting them decline. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chuck. Much appreciated. Public forum is still open, just saying. Last call? All right. I will close the public forum at 7:47. And with that, we move on to staff reports.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So that was the update. Council did approve the preliminary plat for St. Francis with a 4-3 vote. However, as Mr. Rowan stated, they did express some concerns and would like to see a master plan moving forward. The City Council also denied the rezoning and text amendment request from Paradigm Auto and further directed staff to enforce the ordinance. Also, from the last council meeting, staff have reviewed underdeveloped rental properties in Brainerd and will be sending out development opportunity letters to those property owners. Certainly trying to look for properties where a standard lot in Brainerd and the lot and block is typically about 50 to 150 in size. For one example, we have a single family home on essentially 3 lots. So trying to let people know about our new zoning code, what our opportunities are for expanded use, duplexes, accessory dwelling units. So that'll be sent out with their renewal application letter to let them know about opportunities. So with that, that's everything I have.
Very good. Thank you. Any questions for James? Last chance? All right. We will move on to item 10, Commissioner reports. And Commissioner Higgins, do you have anything for us? You don't have to.
Not this time.
Thank you for joining the group. I do appreciate your being here tonight. I think that's going to be, you're going to be a good addition. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave?
No, I do not.
All right. Yes, Justin, anything?
Other than to point out Dave's comment last month,
Yes.
I definitely like Craftsman Homes,
Okay.
and I like the mixed-use buildings downtown. Those are my favorites.
Okay.
There we go. All right. I like a good Craftsman home too. I can appreciate that. Yeah, with all the built-ins, the built-in kind of things.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Dad?
Yes, to Craftsman Home. I'm trying to do the homework on the fly here.
So you didn't do your homework.
Got a couple in mind. It's hard to pick, I'll put it that way. Nothing to report other than, Vice Chair, I'm glad you're here. I did not want the gavel again tonight. So thank you.
Well, this may be a one-off here, but it's fun to be back behind the gavel here. It's you're all a good group. I have nothing. I'll work on the on my favorite home style and commercial business. I'll work on that for next month for
Right,
you.
that'll
Come
work.
up with a couple winners there. With that, we're looking for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Got a motion.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much, folks.